Welcome to the Undertone podcast, where we talk about all things creepy. I'm your in-house skeptic, Evie Babbage, and I'm joined by my believer co-host, Justin Manuel.
You're gonna love this. I got something juicy.
Ooh, do tell.
10 mysterious audio recordings from an anonymous email. Let's keep an open mind, Evie.
Let me guess, it's a demonic possession.
Okay, easy. All right. We've heard weird stuff before, but this feels different.
You believe that?
I'd like to speak with Mary.
What if it's a warning?
There's only one way to find out.
We should stop listening.
What were you thinking? You shouldn't have listened to all of them. It's what she wants.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Fresh Cuts. This is Mike. Joining me, as always, it's Mr. Venom. What's up, Venom?
Greetings and salutations, horror podcasters. Hey, that's us, isn't it? How the hell are you doing, Mike? I'm doing all right.
I'm doing well. I had an interesting day today because at work we had some type of cyber threat attack. Not a threat, but like scare, I guess, with like the systems being attacked. So I had this because working from home, it was kind of a weird day because it wasn't like an official day off because I still had to kind of be in the vicinity of my work computer in case we got like updates. But for the most part, it was a day off. So I ended up watching the Godzilla -1 4K, which was awesome. So,
Of course.
yeah, first time I've seen it since the theaters. So still great.
I don't think I've gone more than 3 weeks without watching -1 since it left theaters, since I got that 4K.
Damn.
And I always alternate between color and black and white.
Yeah, that'll probably be my next watch, is throwing on the black and white version. All right. Also with us, it's Don and Ellie. How's it going, Don?
Yeah, what's going on? Always happy to be here.
Don knows a thing or two about Godzilla, too.
Yeah.
He does.
I don't know if my 4K has the black and white version, but I do know a thing or two about that particular film.
All right. So this week we had a couple of releases, but we're probably going with the one that was more well-known, probably advertised more, I think, and that would be Undertone. And let's see, Undertone on IMDb. The host of a popular paranormal podcast becomes haunted by terrifying recordings mysteriously sent her way. Okay. That sums it up pretty good for a synopsis. So we will start with our general thoughts. And Venom, what did you think of Undertone?
Well, for anyone who knows me, you know that I have a bachelor's degree in audio engineering. I am a former musician, played bass for well over 20 years in multiple metal bands. And of course, as you're listening to me right now, of course, I am also a podcaster. So it seems like this movie was probably tailor-made for me. So take that as a caveat to my review. Because I am going to completely fillet this movie. I loved it. This movie spoke to me in so many ways. Just the obvious first thing that everybody's going to talk about is the audio quality, and I'm going to be no different. This audio is stellar. This is a movie that demands to be watched in a theater, and preferably a Dolby theater if you have that, option. I watched it twice this weekend, once in Dolby and once in like an XL Prime format, whatever the hell that is, at AMC. but that Dolby screening was just spectacular. The way that the audio in this movie just absolutely engulfs you when you're in a theater, it's so engrossing. It like I said, it demands your attention. And as a podcaster, audio engineer, former musician, I was in absolute heaven. Just this movie worked for me in so many ways. Now, I will admit, this is the sheer definition of a slow burn. Those of you who are not slow burn fans are probably not going to enjoy this one too much. But I got to say that even for a slow burn, this movie that's barely over 90 minutes went by pretty fast, and I think that was more because of my engagement with it. Like, I was instantly a fan of our main character, Evie. Obviously a very broken person with a lot of issues in her life, an unattentive boyfriend, a comatose mother, kind of a faltering career. So overall, I found her compelling. I found her enjoyable. I could get behind her. And she pretty much is 99.9% of this movie ultimately. I mean, there's only really two people on screen this entire movie, and that's just Evie and her comatose mother. We do have Evie's podcast partner, Justin, who we only hear his voice throughout the film. So yeah, like I said, atmospherically, as far as the tension goes, this thing's a 10 out of 10. I absolutely was enthralled with it. Now, there are issues that I think people are going to have with this. Specifically, it's going to be the ending. And I'm not going to spoil the story part of the ending, but I'm going to spoil the aesthetic of it. And basically, the last few minutes of this movie are totally black. It's audio only, and I can see how a majority of people who sit through an hour and a half of this movie just to get no visual ending is going to upset a lot of people. For me, I totally loved it. I totally understood what was happening during that black scene, because that's another thing, is that some people might not fully grasp what's happening during that scene. Obviously, the previous 90 minutes has kind of set up what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. But with the movie going to black for the last couple of minutes, it's going to be divisive for some people. Like I said, if you're very much a visually driven horror fan, I think this movie might not work for you as much. But I mean, if you're a fan of some of the past great audio movies like Blowout and what was it? Bavarian like sound effects company. I can't remember the full name of that movie, but that one had Toby Jones in it, and it was fucking spectacular. So
Barbarian Sound Studio.
Thank you. That's the one. And Pontypool. Like I said, if you're a fan of movies like that utilize audio horror, I think Undertone is going to work for you in every way. But if you're a fan of more visually stunning horror movies, stuff like, Conjuring movies or like, things like that are definitely more about the visual horror, then I can see how this one's not going to work for you. I've already seen reviews where people are calling this the most boring horror movie of the year, and that it doesn't deserve the accolades that it's gotten throughout its festival run. But I'm here to tell you, I disagree with all that. I had an absolute blast with this movie. I loved our main character. Now, there's one thing that I'm going to bring up that probably a lot of reviewers won't, but again, it's kind of my style. I'm constantly bringing up logic into horror movies, and I'm going to do it again here. There's a big trend where when a profession or an activity is portrayed in a movie, people who partake in that profession or activity in real life will always have issues with how it's portrayed in the movie. And with me, it's the audio quality. The audio quality that these people get is astounding. First of all, they're not even in the same room, as I said, or co-host. They're recording this over like Zoom or StreamYard or, whatever communication app that they're using. And the audio quality is like they're inside of a fucking isolation booth in a recording studio. This woman is recording in her dining room, on her dining room table, in a room with a high ceiling. any podcaster who's ever recorded in a room like that and then went back and listened to the audio knows that the audio is not going to be super crisp like it was done in a recording studio. Evie doesn't even have an isolation panel around her mic. Like I have an isolation panel, but I'm still recording in my dining room. So I don't expect studio quality audio when I listen back to my stuff. So yeah, I'm going to complain, but I'm also very jealous because the audio quality that these two get on their little podcast recording on Zoom or, whatever, I'm absolutely jealous of because I don't think any podcast I've ever edited or been on has ever sounded as nice. But of course, it's a movie, so they're going to obviously strive to make the audio as perfect as possible. So it's a minor gripe, but again, it's just one of these real world things, real world logic that I'm interjecting into a horror movie, which I'm sure most people hate, but I'm going to keep doing it. I don't care. The long and the short of it is I absolutely love this movie. It is easily my favorite movie of the year so far, though I can pretty much guarantee it will not be my favorite movie by the end of the year because it's just missing too many things that I like in my horror. And yes, I do like the visual aspects of horror. I like my blood. I like my gore. I like my creative kills. And ultimately, this movie is masterful at giving us atmosphere and tension, but when it comes to actual visceral on-screen horror, we just get very, very little. So, take that into account if you're thinking about going to see this movie, but I would still strongly recommend checking this out in theaters if you can. Or if you don't make it to theaters when it does finally come out on streaming, watch it with really good headphones. Like if you got a really good pair of studio headphones, Beats or something like that, watch it with the really good headphones. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. So yeah, like I said, overall, I love this. My favorite of the year, though I can't imagine it will be by the end of the year. So I'll leave my general thoughts at that for now.
Okay, let's move it on over to Don. Thoughts on Undertone?
Yeah, I wanted to like this a little bit more than I did. I do admit I do like the setup. I do think it's clever and unique, and in the first act, it is pretty engaging, trying to go along this different route of it being more auditory. And I'm, like Venom said, I'm far, far and away a visual person rather than auditory, fan. To the extent that I actually don't even care for silent era films. Like I can't do it. There's just something missing, even though I'm watching, like fantastic, visual set pieces and sequences. I don't get the immersive quality that I get when, there's no sound there and all you hear is this blaring ragtime piano in the background. It doesn't have that kind of immersive quality. So I do agree. I do like this, the visuals of it all. And, yeah, okay. I mean, I do admit, the sound does play a factor, but it's not like a defining factor. And this is going to be like a really weird comparison, but if you follow along with me, it'll make a little bit of sense. Or if not, who cares? But at least it makes sense to me. When it comes to horror and what I really want out of a horror film, I want an idea of what I should be afraid of and why. And when it comes to, that, the easiest way to do it is to show somebody getting violently killed. And, a great example of that is, the original Hatchet movie. Now, the very first time we see Victor Crowley, and I mean the very first time we get a full, clear-cut, unobstructed look at him, he shows up on the swamp tour and he hacks the one guy's arm off before turning to the wife who's trying to flee, pulls her head open like a soda can. Now, when I get something like that, I know immediately why I should be afraid of him, and I get an idea of why I should be afraid of him because I can see what he can do, and they're giving me an unobstructed look at it. You get to see the arm getting split open. You get to see all the viscera flying all over the place, the blood splatter just spraying all over the place, and it creates a visual that is incredibly easy to understand, and it makes it very easy for me as a viewer to understand why I should be afraid of him, because this is what he can do to some random person. What's he going to do when he gets his hands on people that I care about, the rest of the people on the tour? And that creates a lot of tension going forward, because what's going to happen if Crowley catches up to these people and does something, can he do something far worse? Are we going to get something where, who's going to survive, who isn't? There's something palatable there that it creates an immersive experience, and I get into the film a lot easier. With this, just listening to people, talk on headphones, trying to, isolate sounds. I understand where they're going from, and I give them credit for employing the concept, but it's not all that interesting, and it doesn't really get me into the movie as much as I want it to be. I do like the idea of the film in general. I do like the idea of exploring these strange sounds hidden within these recordings and figuring out what's going on. The investigative process, trying to figure out what's happening, whether or not she's going to remain sane, what's going to happen if something happens to her. I like the idea and the concept of this one, and I think there's an intriguing idea there. But yeah, it's just not conducted in a manner that, for me personally, gets me into the story. And yeah, the running time, I can feel myself dragging a little bit. I can feel, it kind of wearing out its welcome the longer it goes on. Had this been like a 30-40 minutes short in an anthology, I probably would have been praising it as one of the better examples in the time frame. But for whatever reason, yeah, as a feature-length film, it didn't work for me as well as other films of this, with a similar setup of a person trying to investigate something, unexpected that they find. I do think that there's something here, and I do want to encourage the use of, these tactics. But for this particular reason, yeah, it just didn't work, and it didn't hook me as much as I wanted it to. So yeah, it kind of wears out its welcome, and it kind of plods along. And then yeah, the finale does kind of um yeah, the not really wanting to, go too deeper into what Venom already said. But yeah, I kind of had the same issues with the finale that he did. But yeah, I don't want to go much further than that, just for the sake of not spoiling everything. But yeah, I guess I don't really want to give too much else away for fear of spoilers. So yeah, I guess I'll say it's a watch if you're interested in it. And I do want to say that if you're curious about the presentation, the creativity behind it, I do say that it is worth a watch. But yeah, if you're more of a traditionally minded person that's, more visual scares, and you need blood, guts, and viscera, then I don't know if this is going to be a recommended theater watch. Maybe something towards Halloween as more of a fill in the year kind of a challenge, or like a year catch up kind of a stipulation for something like that, or whatever. But yeah, I would say if you're curious about it, it's worth a watch. If you think it's not going to be worth your while, then I would say wait for streaming or something. But yeah, I guess with that, I'll say back to you, Mike.
Okay. So something I didn't know until after I saw the movie actually was this movie's distributed by A24, but A24 didn't produce it. This was like an indie film. I guess they made it in like 12 days, and then A24 picked it up. Now, I haven't read it. I haven't read and looked into, because I'm gonna assume that A24 probably put some financial backing into, like, maybe remixing the sound, maybe sprucing up how it looks a little. Because yeah, this was like a very indie movie, I guess, initially. It looks good. I mean, I'll get to the sound in a second, but I mean it looks good, good enough to where like I'm like, what, a 12-day set of an indie film. So I'm assuming A24 did some sprucing of the mix up because I do agree the audio is fantastic. I saw it at Regal's Dolby. Um, they call it RPX in the app, but then when you actually get to the theater, like it says Dolby Atmos on the door, so it's the same thing. Um, in fact, I've actually with Regal, even though I have Regal Unlimited, you have to pay like a $2 charge for Dolby. I've actually been doing that. Not every movie I see, but certain ones I have been recently more than in the past. Partially because sometimes if the timing works better, I'm just like, it's only $2. I'll just pay to go see the movie at the time that works best for me. But then, like, I think for Scream 7, because it's a big production slasher, and then this one specifically, I knew that it was like auditory driven. So, and I will say it was a good decision on behalf for this movie because I think because like the majority of the movie is spent watching a character with headphones on, the fact that you're getting kind of like the Dolby mix where it's not just loud because like when you go to the theater, obviously the surround like the basic surround sound, everything's going to be loud and flashy, but when you go to like the upgraded sound, like every you're getting like this out of left channel, this out of right channel, center, rear, like everything is mixed in a certain way that it definitely enhances the experience. So if any listeners haven't listened yet and you're considering like the what to do, like I don't know how it works at every chain. I can only speak for Regal and how it works, but if it's only like $1 or two at other chains, I would say it's worth it specifically for this movie because I do think that the sound mix and sound design is like the strength of the movie. Otherwise, to me, it's very basic, very minimalist. It's a setup where everyone should probably be familiar with. I think because it's so minimalist, I think one of the mistakes it kind of makes is you kind of learn right off the bat what how it's going to go as far as like the gradual, I guess, progression because there's a certain amount of things that they have to get through. So to me, that's what kind of makes you feel the running time because I didn't feel like it was particularly slow. Like I wasn't like feeling it like because I think it's only about like 90 minutes. I didn't think it dragged or anything. I just think because you kind of know, oh, they have to get through this before we get to the conclusion, it's almost like laying out the steps ahead of time so you can kind of calculate where we are in the movie as it goes. So maybe that could make you feel the running time. But overall, I thought it was a decent movie. Well, I don't know. It was okay. I thought it was okay. The advertising, of course, over the top to me, in my opinion. I think the audio cues, like it did a good job using the audio to its like fullest capacity as far as like you know enhancing what's going on the screen. Kind of it might get you a couple good jumps, but to me it's not enough to make the movie like really good. It's just a decent movie with a great sound design. I don't mind slow burns. They've never bothered me as long as what we get at the end is worth the burn. This one, I don't know. And to me, I almost think that the fact that A24 picked it up kind of it almost I don't know if it did it a disservice because I like I said, I think they definitely helped with the technical aspects once they put behind it, but it also comes with like the A24 advertising expectations, like the way they know how like the way they like to advertise their movies is what it's gonna be. And it's like, I don't know, if people would have gone into this knowing it was like a 12-day indie production, maybe they'd think different, but yeah, it's okay. Um, what can I say? Like, so we've already had the setup there. It's a podcast duo that they're kind of uncovering a mystery. I think they're more like a paranormal experience versus straight true crime. So they're going through that, figuring out the clues, listening to audio clips. I just think like to me, it's just there's not a lot to it. So you're kind of, yeah, you're just kind of relying on the sound. I mean, I don't have a lot to say because there's just not a lot to this story. I thought it was okay, but by the end, I was like, it was almost a better experience to me than it was a movie, just because of the Dolby experience. So I would say when we always have the question of like, should you see it in the theater? Yes, you absolutely should because it's going to be hard to replicate. Like, unless you really love this movie outside of like what it sounds like in the theater, I don't know if you're going to be able to replicate the experience at home. And I know that's like, I say that about a lot of movies, but I think this one especially because to me, that's the strength, and it's gonna get taken away by home viewing. So I would say this is like one of the cases where, yes, it is imperative that you see this in the theater in the best audio format available. Without it, I don't know. I don't think it's that great. It's okay. So I'll leave it at that for now. I mean, there'll be more to say when we get to spoilers. Just that it's to me, there's not a lot to say without spoilers because there's not a whole lot to the story. But I'll leave it at that. So back to you, Venom.
I gotta say that on the second watch, I noticed a lot more of like the background, like the set decor, and how strong religion actually is a theme in this movie. Like on first watch, yes, there's the whole conversation or the voicemail that mom had left asking her to join her at church because she hadn't seen her there in a little bit. But when you're really watching the movie intensely, especially after you've watched it once already and you know where the story's going and you can kind of pay more attention to like the background and things like that. I was very surprised at how much religious iconography there is in this movie, which, is not a complaint by any stretch, but it kind of adds a little bit to kind of the allure of this whole thing because our demon in this movie obviously is able to enter this home. And you would think that because the matriarch of this home is a very religious person, that she wouldn't be able to. But the problem is that daughter is there, Evie, who is very much an atheist, who very much doesn't really have, I mean, she's a skeptic when it comes to the paranormal. She's very much an atheist in the sense that she has no real religious connections. And I think that's a big part of how this demon is able to enter this home. And then, of course, after we find out something about Evie physically, it makes a lot more sense along with, what this demon's kind of MO is, their backstory, what their intention is, things like that. So I just like the way that this was a movie that I really thought needed a second watch because you get a lot more of the story, assuming you enjoyed it the first time, that is. When you watch it the second time and you don't have to maybe pay attention as hard to the actual audio files that are being listened to, and you can actually watch the background of the film a little bit more. And sometimes I feel like this movie is playing tricks on us, or maybe it's my own eyes that were playing tricks on me where I thought I saw something move that actually wasn't there. Yes, there are times where there's very obviously things in the background, but those are usually fairly focused on, so you can't miss it. But when you're as like paranoid and tense about the situation as I was sitting in the theater, I found myself freaking myself out thinking I saw something there. I thought I saw something there. And honestly, I think that's just great filmmaking. And we haven't even mentioned the fact yet that this is a first time director. This is his feature debut. And once again, A24 finding these directors that don't have any feature length experience and putting out spectacular movies. I mean, this is at least a half dozen to a dozen now of A24 giving first time feature length directors a chance, and they hit a home run right off the bat. So Ian Tuason, however you pronounce your name. I'm looking forward to see what else you got, because this movie costs less than $500,000. This was less than $500,000 movie that made $9.5 million in the theaters on opening weekend. And obviously it still has, a few more weeks of a theatrical run ahead of it. So, it could hit 20, 15, 20 million, which, that, I mean, it's already a success. At under 500,000, 9.5 million on opening weekend is beyond a success. Like, this is the kind of thing that, makes Blumhouse, cream their pants. But, I think A24 is kind of used to this kind of success on low budgets. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about this movie. But I can also see that it is not for everyone. Like, all of Don's complaints are 100% valid. This movie is not for everyone. If you are a more visual horror movie viewer, looking for the over the top visuals, the gore, the monsters, the creatures, then this movie is just not for you. I would say avoid it. But like I said, if you're a fan of any of the types of movies that I mentioned earlier, with stuff like Blowout, even Host a little bit, you've got some elements of Host in here, which obviously this isn't found footage by any stretch, but we still get that element of like people chatting on the internet and things potentially happening in this at our location. I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is a chamber piece. It's not a true chamber piece, because chamber pieces usually take place, the entirety of the film take place in one room, kind of like Brooklyn 45 from a few years ago. This movie technically takes place in a couple of different rooms: the dining room for all the podcasting stuff, and then mom's bedroom for, a lot of the scares and things like that. And that's another thing, the fact that this movie doesn't rely on jump scares, but still gives us some amazing tension. Like, I felt like jump scares were coming. And I also feel like if, a studio like Blumhouse would have made this movie, it would have been filled with jump scares, and we probably would have seen the demon, 20 minutes into the movie or whatever the case may be. But because A24 generally doesn't strive for the visual, they strive for atmosphere and tension. I think they did this movie a service. Whether they had anything to do with the production of this, or it was all Ian Tueson's doing, on an independent level, and A24 just picked it up, either way, I think it's brilliantly done, and I'm looking forward to what Ian has ahead of him. So yeah, I guess with that, unless my co-hosts have anything non-spoiler to add, we can get into our spoiler conversation. Gentlemen?
Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Well, I don't think this movie really needs a walkthrough, but one thing that I do want to talk about is, of course, our demon. Now, very quickly, you've seen the trailer. I'm sure many of you have seen the trailer. If you know the trailer, then you know the setup. A podcaster who is, living with a comatose mother who's basically in hospice care, where, she's literally potentially days from passing away. Evie is her daughter, taking care of her at mom's house. She does have a boyfriend who's a little disconnected, if you will. And throughout, as the film goes along, we find out that Evie is actually pregnant, which kind of leads us to our demon. And our demon of our film is named Abishu. Wait, was that it? Abisu? I forget already.
Sounds
anyway,
similar, or sounds close enough.
Yeah, I think it was Abiso. So basically, Abiso, who is a real world demon, at least in real world mythology, of course, coming from like the Middle East, is a demon who basically causes miscarriages or actively murders children because of her past with the loss of her child in life. Or I think the story was something along the lines of she killed her child in life and was basically cursed. Very similar to La Llorona, if you will. This was basically the Caucasian La Llorona, if you will, or the Middle Eastern La Llorona would be the better way to put it. So that's basically what's going on. So obviously later in the film, when we find out that Evie is actually pregnant, it totally makes sense that Abishu is now here. Going after this person. And man, like I said, the tension in this to me is second to none. It's not going to work for everybody because Don and I have both already explained why it'll work for some and won't work for others. But if it works for you, goddamn, I think you're in for a good time. So as they listen, go ahead, Mike.
So since you saw it a second time, are we supposed to take that the the demon kind of like was like discovered her like through the record, like through them dissecting the recordings, and it kind of like opened the door for the demon to like discover her because I would assume I mean there's so many pregnant people out in the world that like the demon could go after anyone, but I know they were sent the files and then they start listening. And it's like as they progress through the files, is that kind of like what? Because I think they get that one caller, what, halfway or two quarters, three quarters through the movie where she's like, "You shouldn't have called out to him," or whatever.
Mhm.
So is that kind of like how the demon like found her because they were going through it and
I don't
repeating
know.
like
I don't think
things?
the
Because
movie actually, I'm not sure if the movie actually gives us any kind of path to how the demon found her. I mean, if you remember when they were advertising this movie, one of the taglines for it was "they want to be heard" or "she wants to be heard," something along those lines. So it does make sense that as you become more familiar with it, with the demon, like maybe just the knowledge of the demon kind of attracts her to you. And like
yeah,
I
like
said, the
once you
fact
become a
that,
believer in it, kind of.
yeah, possibly, yeah, I could see that being the case, yeah. But like I said, along with the fact that Evie, Abishu probably realized that Evie was pregnant long before Evie did. So, who knows? Maybe that's why mom was in a coma the whole time. Like they never actually give us any medical information about mom, like why she's in a coma. Was it an injury or anything like that?
Yeah, it sounds like from what I remember, again, you saw it a second time, so you can correct me. The the most we get is like it seems like the mom is like literally we're supposed to believe the mom is like days away from death. Or maybe not days, but like her time is
Mm-hmm.
coming soon. It doesn't sound like she's recovering. It's like end of life at home hospice where you know you you want her to be home with family in her final days, and because they talk about like waiting to hear like her death rattle and her breathing, I guess
Yeah.
the nurse is like letting her know. And so I mean I don't necessarily want to skip to the end, but like are we at the end, are we supposed to believe that the demon possesses the mom to murder the unborn child, like causing a is that what we're supposed to believe at the end happens?
Yes, that's at
Okay. That's
100%
what
what
I
I think is
thought.
happening.
Okay,
I
because
think
well, yeah,
I feel like Abazu has the ability to possess, whatever woman she kind of wants to. Because I feel like Evie herself was probably possessed when she drew all those drawings. Like she,
mhm.
all the crayon drawings that she did throughout the movie. I feel like that's Abazu working through Evie and almost like giving her clues as to what's going to happen. Like, because the image that she ends up drawing is of Abazu herself holding like a dead baby upside down in her arms, in her hand, like holding it up by its feet, and it's bleeding. There's a puddle of blood underneath, so it's almost like Abazu is this is Abazu's warning. And then the fact that the audio files that we're listening to, the 10 audio files, which we'll get into that a little bit, what's on those audio files. We hear the female character in the audio files, Jessa, repeating a very cryptic line. And that cryptic line is basically the language that Abazu speaks, but backwards. And the translation is "come in, Abazu." So literally, Abazu is possessing these women to invite her into their life, which is kind of odd because if you can already possess them, aren't you already in there? But it's almost like Abazu has that vampire quality where she has to be invited in. But that weird, audio file that we hear, and then we even hear Evie saying it at the end of the movie, which is again the translation of "come in, Abazu." Again, it's kind of a theme throughout of Abazu being able to control these people and even control their ability to let Abazu in. Because, as with most demons, they need to be allowed in. A demon can't really, do anything it wants necessarily. They seem all powerful, but even demons have rules and mythology. So, yeah. So, like I said, that's kind of my interpretation of what we see and mostly hear in this movie. But let's talk about those audio files. So obviously, the gist of the movie is that these two podcasters were emailed 10 audio files by a mysterious address that neither of them recognize. They go ahead and they decide to listen to the files for the first time live on their podcast. I say live on their podcast. They record live, as in every podcast, but then they edit it all together and put it out there. But the point is, the way that they're, listening to the files for the first time obviously adds that sense of tension, of dread, of, what the hell is this we're listening to? So what we're actually listening to is these two people, Mike and Jessa, a couple who at the beginning, during the first audio file, it sounds like they're pregnant, like they're expecting a baby. But then as the audio files progress, we hear a baby crying in the background. So obviously Jessa had her kid. And basically the recordings start as a way for Mike, the boyfriend or husband, whichever it is, to prove to Jessa that she talks in her sleep. Jessa obviously denies it. Mike says, no, I swear to God, you speak in your sleep. So he starts recording, and then he plays back those files to Jessa, so that as the files go along, as we're listening to more and more of them, we hear that Jessa is actually starting to believe and buy into what potentially might be happening. Now, that's kind of the gist of the audio files. And obviously they get more and more intense. We hear more and more babies crying in the background. We hear more and more chanting. And sometimes the chanting even sounds like it's being done by more than one voice. Like maybe Jessa is speaking with her own voice, but then with Abazu's voice as well, which is obviously much deeper and demonic sounding. So, and obviously it all comes to a head with the final. And as I've already explained how Abazu works, that she basically causes miscarriages or outright murders children. Obviously, we kind of know that Abazu is after Jessa's child in the audio files. It obviously comes to a head with the last two audio files where we hear intense screaming. We hear in the last audio file, we hear a baby crying in the background, but then we hear a loud thud and the baby instantly stops crying. So obviously, what we're seeing in our head is probably much worse than anything they could have set to film. But yeah, especially if you have kids, I would imagine that's an absolute nightmare audio file to have to listen to. And then after the baby stops crying, we hear Jessa continue that ridiculous chant that we hear throughout the movie. Go ahead, Mike.
No, you're talking about the ending now after it fades to black and all that.
Almost. Yeah, we're almost there. I'm just talking about the last audio file right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it sounds like in that audio file, it's kind of like the culmination of what we've been getting, or all the clues and breadcrumbs of like what this demon is all about.
Exactly. Yep. Now, one thing that I haven't talked about with the audio and the brilliance of the sound design here is that as the movie progresses, obviously not Jessa, Evie has her headphones on for like 90% of the time that she's on screen. Because she's recording her podcast for about 90% of the time that she's on screen. And I feel like the brilliance of this audio is how we'll hear sound effects and we won't be able to tell if it's coming from the audio file or if it's actually happening in Evie's house, to the point that even she starts to think that she hears things in her house. There's no actual confirmation that anything physical is happening in the house, or that because Evie is recording a podcast and she's constantly talking or listening to the audio file, she doesn't want to take her headphones off to confirm if there's any sounds coming out of her house. So we never get any kind of confirmation. But the sound effects sometimes will sound like it's coming from the audio file, and other times it'll almost sound clearer, like it's actually coming from upstairs in Evie's house. And I think that's just beautifully done. I really enjoyed that aspect of the audio.
I kept wondering that too, because I kept expecting her to take off her headphones, because the way the audio was mixed as as an audience member or a viewer of the movie. I think in a lot of similar movies, what would happen would be like, oh, she's hearing it on the headphones, but it's actually happening in a house. But this movie, it kind of had the discipline to like not like make it clear because she kept the headphones on because she didn't want to stop hearing what she was hearing on the file. But it was done in such a way where it seemed like she was believing that it was might actually be happening in the house. So that was cool.
Yeah, no, I really like that aspect of it. That, was it not? Did it actually happen? I mean, because you could take this movie as an unreliable narrator, and honestly, like maybe Evie's schizophrenic and we just don't know it. Maybe mom died months ago, and this is just Evie still seeing her mother and acting like she's still taking care of her because that was the only purpose Evie had in her life. And when her mother died, she lost that purpose, which basically means she lost herself. I don't know. Like I said, it's just an interpretation of what may have happened. But then we get to the end of the film. And, after we've heard all the audio files. Well, actually, wait. Before we get to the end of the film, there's the phone calls, the call-ins. Now, once the final audio file is played, Evie and Justin let people call in, which, good on them that they have a podcast where people can call in live. Rock on. But we start the very first caller is literally a guy who says he lives down the street from Mike and Jessa, and says that, oh yeah, they and their baby were found dead. They were found at the bottom of their stairs with plastic bags around their heads, and basically crayon drawings of babies all over their house. So of course, Evie, being the skeptic, thinks that this is a bullshit call, just some guy trying to add to the drama. Justin, of course, being the eternal believer, instantly believes it and instantly doesn't want to listen to any more files, or doesn't want to play the end of the last file. I think they talk to this guy as they're playing the last file, something along those lines. So then it becomes Justin who doesn't want to listen to it. But then as they go deeper and deeper, our skeptic starts to become a believer. And then she's the one who doesn't really want to, finish that last file, thinking that there could be something, evil connected to this audio file or anybody who listens to it. One thing that I forgot to mention is that they actually use a real world internet meme, like a video that was in the early part of the internet. There was this video, I forget the name of it, but it was basically just a shot of a woman looking into the camera smiling. And the image would get slightly like more and more twisted as the video went along. And it was that video that claimed, 90% of the people that watch this video have died, those early creepypastas from the early internet. I like the way that they utilize that in this movie where Evie uses that video to kind of make fun of Mike, why am I confusing all of my fucking names? God damn it. Evie is using that video to fuck with Justin, her podcast partner, because Justin believes in it and he doesn't want to watch the video because he believes the internet rumor that if you watch this video, you're going to die. Well, later in the film, when the shit starts to hit the fan in the house, that video pops up on the TV screen, but with very different twisted images of this woman almost looking demonic a couple of times. And Evie barely paying attention to it because she's obviously, thinking about her mother and everything else that could potentially happen, blah, blah, blah. So I did like the use of like real world, early internet creepypasta videos. I thought that was pretty cool. And then we get to the end of our movie, which basically as we get a few callers calling in and talking about, the files and, Mike and Jessa and blah, blah, blah. But then we get the final caller, and the final caller is named Abby. And Abby is crying right from the onset of the call. And she's crying because she can't get her baby to stop crying. And we actually hear the baby crying in the background. And then Abby starts saying very cryptic things like, well, I know how to make the baby stop crying. I know how to make the baby stop crying forever. and that's when Evie, and then that's when we get the revelation from Evie that Evie is kind of responsible for her mother's condition. As it turns out, her mother had a stroke years earlier, and Evie should have taken care of her mother, to the point where she might have actually recovered. But because of Evie's alcohol addiction, because of her prioritizing her shitty boyfriend over time with her mother basically deteriorated into the comatose state that she's in now. And then she actually confesses on the, literally live on the podcast, I killed my mother. Now she's doing that to try to prove to Abby that, that Abby is a good person, because Abby is on the phone crying and obviously thinking about, ending her child's life. And Evie is trying to tell her that, no, there are worse people in the world than you. You are not bad. You are good. I let my mother die, and I deserve, any repercussions that I might have. So, once again, another reason potentially why Abazu picked this household, because, guilt, guilt is always a easy emotion to attract demons. If you feel guilty about something that you've done, mythologically, demons are attracted by that, and they will fuck with you, and they will take that information and use it against you to pretty much drive you crazy. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because like I feel like something this movie does is it drops a lot of breadcrumbs, but doesn't. I don't know if it purposely wants the viewer to kind of come up with their own explanation, because like
Mm-hmm.
I saw it I think Friday, so a little bit is coming back to me now as we talk about it. We get little bits and pieces. Like first there's the Catholic thing. So she's Catholic with either I don't know if I would say unwanted pregnancy, but at least unexpected. She's caring for her dying mother. It sounds like they allude between her and her boyfriend. It sounds like they're alluding to like maybe she's had substance abuse problems in the past, only because he kind of harps on her like not drinking. They don't like come out and
Yeah.
say like, "Oh, you've had an issue before," but the way the dialogue is worded. So I feel like there could be themes of guilt. There could be themes of like pregnancy psychosis, because also I was like reading some other reviews, and they said there's some like weird tendencies. Like usually when you take a pregnancy test, like the doctor doesn't like call you for the results unless there's like an issue. Like you usually have to call. So I don't know if that was just, I don't know if that's much ado about nothing, and that's just something that this specific reviewer picked up, but it's, you know, so there's all these like little pieces there, but it's not like something like The Exorcist. Like, in The Exorcist, they lean heavily into the Catholic guilt aspect to where there's no question about it. Like, that's going on. In this one, it's like, it's almost like you're given a little piece of a lot of different things, and maybe they all kind of go together to maybe say, hey, she was just going through psychosis in this whole movie, and that's what we're supposed to take. So, like, I feel like maybe it was filmed in a way, and maybe that's where the minimalism plays into it, where like the viewer is supposed to kind of make up for themselves, because then you have the folklore of the demon that kind of doesn't match her situation, but we're not 100% sure why the demon like reached out or picked her. So there's like a whole bunch of little things that maybe the viewer is supposed to come up with like their own explanation in the end.
No, absolutely. And usually 9 times out of 10, I enjoy movies like that. I'm the kind of movie viewer that doesn't need their conclusion handed to them on a silver platter. Sometimes I enjoy that, don't get me wrong, but movies that make you think and make you come up with your own ending, I generally enjoy. And when coupled with the sound design that we get here, the lore that we get here, and the performances that we get here, it just makes for a great movie, in my opinion. So, yeah, like I said, thoroughly enjoyed this one. That ending is going to be divisive. Like I said, some people want a more visual ending. This ending reminds me of the Blair Witch Project. I mean, I know a lot of people listening to my voice right now weren't horror fans 28 years ago when the Blair Witch, God, 28 years ago, when the Blair Witch Project was released. But for those of us who were, we remember how divisive that ending was in theaters. Like, a lot of people absolutely hated that ending. A lot of people hated the Blair Witch beginning to end anyway, so that's fine. But I remember at the time that ending being very divisive and actually getting boos in the theater. Like, I remember there was an equal amount of applause and boos at the first time I saw the Blair Witch Project in theaters. So this ending kind of reminded me of that. It's going to make a lot of people happy in the sense that they get just enough, and they're able to put the pieces together themselves, or people are going to walk out of the theater scratching their head like, what the fuck happened at the end? I don't even know who lives, who dies, blah blah blah. So it's going to be divisive, but ultimately it worked for me. I enjoyed it. I watched it twice. I'm not against going and watching it a third time. I will definitely go see it in another Dolby theater though, because that experience was definitely second to none. This movie, these are the kind of movies that are made for Dolby theaters. So yeah, fuck Avatar. Check this out in a Dolby theater. This thing was amazing. So that's pretty much all I got to say about this movie. I mean, we can make fun of Avatar more. I enjoy doing that.
Yeah. Another interpretation I've actually heard is like this is kind of like the millennials version of existential dread because of the situation where because I'm considered like a year one millennial or last year Gen X, just depending on where you draw the line. Uh, and we're getting to the age where like the prospect of like having to take care of like our elderly parents is like coming upon us because of for us whose parents are still alive, like they're kind of like getting that age, you know. So I've even heard it could be like the dread about that that coming. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to like play around with in this movie.
Mm-hmm. And if for whatever reason you actually enjoyed at least the story of Abazu, there are multiple movies out there. The two that come to mind right away are The Possession from 2012. Not exactly a movie that I praised, but a worthwhile movie to sit through. And then The Offering from 2023. Those are two movies that also have Abazu as their, big bad, their demon, if you will. So, and there's others out there. Like, I actually found, a list that had about a half dozen titles of movies that feature Abazu. So, look around if you're a fan. If you like demons that kill unborn babies, check out those movies.
Yeah. Okay. So what else you got for people to listen to, Venom?
Unfortunately, we had plans to record Creature Comforts this weekend, but there was this one's on me this time, folks. Basically, I had some call outs at the store that I work at, and unfortunately, I had to work too late to then come home and record Creature Comforts, especially with one of our hosts being on the East Coast. They would have been up well past 1 a.m. to be able to record yesterday. So that got postponed. But fingers crossed, this coming weekend, we've got the latest episode of Creature Comforts, episode 48, should get recorded, and the latest episode of the main show, which will have a special guest, which, I'll let Mike talk about if he wants to, or we'll keep it under our hat until we record. So yeah, hopefully this weekend, 2 more No More Room in Hell shows will be recorded and out shortly after that. But otherwise, nothing else from me.
All right, Dom, what you got?
I'm waiting on Creature Comforts to get recorded. The only other thing that I have is not a new show, but a new piece of writing that is out there. I've known about this one since pretty much Valentine's Day, but I had to keep it under wraps just because I didn't know when the official release date would have been. But I am, I guess you could say, published author. I have a short story in a collection called Flash of the Dead, Egypt, which is by I think it's Wicked Sun Publications. Let me just look it up real fast. Okay, it's Wicked Shadow Press. I knew I was close. Yeah, it's basically just flash fiction. So it's just 1,000 words or under per story, and I'm included. So if you want to check that out, there's links on the website, wickedshadowpress.induswords.in, or just search for Wicked Shadow Press online, and should be pretty easy to find. And links are there for you to check out. So hopefully that is this first of many. But other than that, not much else.
All right. Yeah, we do have the next main show record, or excuse me, scheduled to record. I'll probably, yeah, like Venom said, maybe I'll hold off just because we have so many snafus that I want to wait. I'll put it like this, if everything goes off the way it's scheduled, then on the next episode of Fresh Cuts, I'll announce everything. I also have another Cinema Beef recording coming up, which I'll also wait just in case. But if everything goes as scheduled, then next week I'll have plenty to announce. That's new and ready to go. What else? I think that's it. Next episode, I assume Ready or Not 2. Is that what's happening? Or
Yeah, I can't imagine we're gonna pick anything else.
isn't it funny that Ready or Not 2 and then what is it? Is it They Will Kill
They
You or
will
We Will
kill
Kill
you.
You? 2 weeks in a row
They
and they
will
look
kill
so
you.
similar.
Yeah.
It's funny
Yeah,
because
no,
like they're running
absolutely.
pretty much the last 3 or 4 weeks they've ran those two trailers back to back, and it feels like you're watching the same trailer almost. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they will kill you just looks so similar to the first Ready or Not. Ready or Not 2 seems like it ups the stakes a little bit more, so I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I'm still gonna check out They Will Kill You. It
oh
looks mildly
yeah.
interesting.
I mean, I think there's a chance they both end up fun just because there's going to be a lot,
Yeah.
as long,
Mhm.
I know kind of what to expect out of a Ready or Not 2 because we've seen one. And if They Will Kill You really goes for it, then at least it's going to be a fun movie. And then what it is beyond that, we'll have to see.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's probably what's coming up. Did you happen to see Slanted, or did you not get a chance to see it?
Unfortunately, I worked open to close yesterday. Yeah, I haven't really had a lot of time to do much, so
Okay.
I'll check it out within the next week or two, definitely.
All right, yeah, I'll probably bring it up if we record Sunday. I'll bring it up on the main show, but I'll keep it spoiler free
Nice.
just in case. Um, and I guess that's it. So yeah, thanks everyone for listening to another episode of Fresh Cuts. We will be back next week with Ready or Not 2. Let's say bye to the listeners.
Never ever listen to mysterious audio files that are emailed to you. Let's just make that a steadfast rule.
Or at least if there's 10, like stop around 5. You're probably good. It has,
Yep.
if one of them's labeled here's the incantation, yeah, don't listen to that one. Peace.